Big day here in the hub, man.
Big is it?
Oh, yeah. Seems like a lot's going on.
Does. There's a lot going on. A lot to get ready for, a lot to be excited
I'm
about.
just starting to get warmed up.
Welcome. Yeah, first cup of coffee. I'm on my second. It's April 15th.
That's
2021. Yeah, that's it. I'm not, just because you brewed some, I'll have another one here in a second. But like we said, it's April 15th, 2021. Welcome aboard Crushing Iron Podcast. We are episode 469, which we discussed, and so I know. Appreciate you tuning in. Hope you have an awesome week so far. We're on time today, which we've either been late or early. I feel like the last 2 weeks. So we're coming to you here on Thursday. We come to you twice a week. Always will.
On your toes.
Yeah, always will. Usually Mondays and Thursdays, but always twice a week. No matter what, we come to you. Holidays, races, vacations. We're here. We're always here. We're always going to be around. So we've been doing this for 5 years. Mike and I are best friends, coaches, and athletes ourselves. And if it's your first time tuning in, welcome. We know you have a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general. We know your time is valuable, so we appreciate you giving us your time. We talk about a whole lot about triathlon and a whole lot of life. We'll talk a little bit more specifics today and then triathlon now that the race season is in what I consider full swing and will be for the rest of the year. So we figured we might dive back into that, but we cover it all. Sometimes we'll go into swim, bike, and run specifics for training. We'll do race recaps and race previews. We'll also have on the occasional guest, but for the most part, Mike and I, as experienced individuals, not experts, not professionals, but experienced, wise old men, sage old men in our ways. We've been doing this for a long time, a very, very, very long time, which I was reminded of this last weekend, how long I've been doing this sport, and still how I got nerves just like last weekend, butterflies, and I think the layoff has been hard on a lot of people, but also good in a lot of ways. And so we appreciate you giving us your time. We got no sponsors, no commercials, no ads, one agenda, and that's to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
And hopefully we're doing that or helping.
Yeah, well, hopefully. Yeah, I mean, I feel like if we weren't helping people, we probably wouldn't still be doing this.
It's a good point, yeah.
Like if we were really hurting people, which I don't know that we can do that. But yeah,
not.
Generally, I feel like we do help people.
Yeah. We're not helping me right now.
Whoa.
I know. I busted these out, dude.
Where are the hokas? You're feeling spry today. You're feeling spry. So usually, the past few weeks, Mike's had on these hokas and rocking his old man game. And look over today, and he's got on some old school Pearl Izumi racing flats, which I believe are 6 years old.
At least. Probably, because I had a few pair of these exact ones, and they took me to Ironman Wisconsin.
You had some blue ones, correct?
I had some blue ones.
Look at me, 6 years ago, and I remember your shoe color.
It's incredible.
It is incredible.
So these are the neon green.
Yeah,
and black. I wore these, and I probably wore these in an Ironman.
Yeah, and they got Yanks in them still, so I know, they're not fresh out of the box, but they're probably feeling fresh right now. Are you feeling spry today, or you feel like you need a little bit of a new mojo? You need to adopt a different approach to your attire, which screams I'm back and I'm ready to race, versus the walk around hokas, which are can be mistaken for the all white New Balances you see mall walkers.
Definitely. I don't know. I'm kind of back and I'm kind of not back, so I'm trying to maybe push this over the edge. I got in the pool yesterday.
Did you?
Swam, and my shoulder has been bugging me for months. Yeah. It felt pretty good. I swam. I was like, you know what? I could probably swim downstream really slow right now if I had to.
Yeah.
So that's uplifting. But man, afterwards it really hurt.
Hurt or just super fatigued?
It's it's like a dull pain.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's fatigue, but then that translates into terrible sleeping. So that's where I'm at. I'm good and bad.
Before we get into the podcast, a small suggestion, if I may.
Sure.
I think you should swim first thing in the morning. Give it time to subside. If there is any pain, let the inflammation come down, maybe it not throb as much, and then as the course of the day, maybe it's not as pronounced, and maybe you can sleep better on it.
Yeah. No,
But I know
probably should have iced it
getting in the
yesterday.
pool in the not early morning, but morning is usually not, I wouldn't dare say early, is usually not your in your wheelhouse, but
Well, there's not much time. We got the podcast at 10.
Seriously, you guys, this is what I deal with on a everyday basis. But we have rotating hours. Today, I figured, since we'll get away from shoe talk, but I figured today it is
a nice segment.
We were going to thank you. It was a shoe talk. I'll try to run away with the rest of the podcast. There's a Florida 70.3 is happening this weekend. I've never done the course, so I'm not going to go through like a play-by-play from like the Ironman website. But I do think it's a great time given the amount of 70.3s that a lot of us are looking at here over the next few weeks and months. I think the first North American Ironman isn't until Tulsa, which is the same week as Chattanooga, which is like the third Sunday in May. But I just off the top of my head, and I know there's more out there across the globe. I know there's one in Australia. We have an athlete doing that next weekend, but we've got Florida 70.3 this weekend. I think it's Bustleton maybe is the following weekend in Australia. You've got St. George 70.3. You've got Chattanooga 70.3. You've got Gulf Coast 70.3. There's a lot of action. And then if you're doing Blue Ridge, that's in June. Like there's a lot of 70.3s coming down the pipe. And so I think today, instead of going like on, just a kind of a general, probably not too detailed preview of the Florida 70.3 course, which is in Haines City. And again, that's this weekend. Fire up your iron track and get ready to cheer on some people and get excited. I figure we could go into maybe just have a chat about how to approach your 70.3 race in general. Like I have a stock email because I don't think it's, it shouldn't vary too much by individual. A stock email that we send out to all of our athletes to prepare them. It's fairly lengthy on how you should approach your 70.3 race day. And then obviously you usually give specifics based on the athlete, either heart rate or power for the bike, but I don't give pacing for the run. I think it should all be by effort because there are some pretty huge differences in. And again, it's also, I think, dependent. There's a lot of everything's always, it depends, right? So we're not going to tell you this is exactly how it should be done, but there are some variances that you'll see in what it feels like to taper for a 70.3 and how you should kind of feel going into it versus how you should feel like tapered and ready to go for an Ironman, because they are totally different beasts. And I think a lot of people approach the tapers for both of those very similar, but I've often found that most people go into 70.3s way over rested. 70.3, especially I think if you're in the sub 6 hour range, so you're looking at completing it what I would consider fairly quickly. You really want to go into those races crisp and fresh with still a little bit of a tension and some pop, in your legs. A lot of people go into these races so over rested and stale. Like the 70.3, again, I think to an extent is the hardest distance to race, just because you can race it from the get-go. Like you're never really kind of holding back. You're always kind of pushing the needle of high zone 2, hanging out in zone 3, and then the run is basically everything you got. So you don't want to be overly rested and stale versus an event like a full, right? Which is going to take people anywhere from 10 hours to 16 hours, right? So you're rarely ever going to do like in the 70.3 times 2. Like a lot of people would say if your 70.3 time is 5 hours, then you're going to do an Ironman. You need to multiply it out and add an hour, based on the courses and based on your fitness levels. So you're looking at 11 hours, looking at over twice the amount of time you're going to spend doing some sort of aerobic intensity, but it's going to be more aerobic than it is anaerobic. And so 70.3 is different. It's a different animal. I think it's very hard to race and hard to get right. Because it's also a short period of time. So if something goes wrong, you don't have the rest of the day to troubleshoot it. So I figured we'd talk about that. I've both done plenty of them in our personal experience. We've also coached hundreds of athletes to 70.3 finishes, and so we know how to, I guess, prescribe that. And so I think that'd be a good topic for us to cover today. Just kind of a general 70.3 prep, how you should feel going into the race, things to probably avoid, and then how you should kind of at least the way that we usually suggest our athletes. Obviously, other coaches and other training plans are going to have you, running a specific pace or swimming a certain pace or whatever. That's not really our jam. So we'll give you, stuff from our best experiences. But does that sound like a good topic for you?
Yeah, it sounds like a great topic. Because it's even since we started, or at least I started, I feel like the approach to 70.3 has changed. And I could be wrong, but it almost feels a little bit like, the Roger Bannister breaking the 4-minute mile thing, in the sense of, when I started, it was kind of like 70.3 was a long, it was a sort of felt like a really, really big deal. But I feel like now people kind of go after 70.3s, man, like they're Olympics. And it's just felt like it's sort of shifted that kind of the mindset of it a little bit. But I also still think, though, that a lot of people getting into it, maybe doing their first 70.3 and it's their first really long day kind of, that's a different animal. But I think more and more people are kind of looking at 70.3s as something that they can really go after.
It's relative, like you said. Right? Yeah. If it's your, and again, like I said, I gave kind of the 6 hour mark is kind of an above and below, threshold. Obviously, like the lower you get, the faster you get underneath that threshold towards the 5:15, the 5 hour, and then obviously anything under 5 hours. If you have the ability and you have the experience to do that kind of time, then you're racing from the gun. There is no, I think I'm going to kind of ease into it because at that point end, seconds matter, right? Minutes matter. Everything that you do matters. Like one of our athletes who qualified for World Championships this past week, and he ended up 6th in his age group, just off the podium by 20 seconds, which was his pee bathroom stop in the Porta-John. And so like there's everything that you have. Like the only it's kind of funny because he's not too disappointed about it, but it was like, we pretty much nailed the prep and nailed the race. We really don't have any complaints. The only thing we need to practice on is learning how to pee on the bike. So that's like the only thing that, we need to do. And so, but it is like the faster you go, the faster you're going to be going over the course of the day and the higher intensity, right? Which is an experience, which is, you've been doing this for a long time, but also, like you said, if it's your first one and you jumped up from a sprint to a 70.3, or like a lot of people do now, they just roll straight in the 70.3 land. It's like, if it's your first long day, then like you said, you have to remember that it is a long day, right? And you do need to come in, extra fresh probably to prepare yourself, because not just from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint, it's a long time, right? If it's a long, long time to be, quote unquote, exercising or working out or racing, however you want to describe it, it's just a long time. And so, yeah, it's one of those things. I also think that the demands of the race course should differentiate, or should make not necessarily your taper, but maybe your approach to the last few days of the race different. If it's going to be a very, very hot race and it's going to take a lot out of you, then you probably need to go in a little more rested, because you're going to be exposing yourself to a harsher environment with, hotter temps, at the same time trying to race your fastest, which is you're gonna need a little bit extra in your reservoir. The biggest mistakes I see people do a week out from a 70.3 is to take way too many rest days, right? So I think one of the biggest, I had a lot of athletes at races last weekend. I think almost all of them, except for a couple, that we didn't do any rest days. Like if they traveled, I'd still get out and do a 20-minute run, like still stay crisp, because when you're in that peak phase, you've done like a huge load, like you really don't need a day. Like you just don't need a day off. Like a day off is just going to get you stale, and it's going to tell your body, be like, hey,
shut it down.
So shut it down, baby. Time to relax. And then it's going to take you a day or two to get. So really, if you just, you lower the volume and still kind of keep some of the intensity around, then you should be good to go. And so I think that you see way too many athletes take days off. And we always talk about this. Your taper is a direct result of the amount of time you've been able to put in to the race itself. A lot of people don't need 2 weeks to taper for 70.3 because you probably haven't done enough work. I don't mean that to sound rude, but like you probably haven't done enough work, consistent work, to justify a 14-day taper, which is a long time. Like, people just try to shed fatigue way too early. Like, in my opinion, like for a 70.3, you shouldn't feel crisp and ready until like 48 hours, 72 hours before. That's when you should, like Tuesday, Wednesday usually, that's when you should be like, there she blows. Like I'm feeling crisp. Like you get fresh, but you're still crisp. You feel light. You feel fast. For an Ironman, I usually say like Thursday to Friday the week before, right? Is when you've really unloaded the volume, because if you've been consistent, and we also do like more of a 2-week stacked taper for an Ironman. We don't do 3 weeks. I think it's just inherently too long. Your body's like it's almost a month, right? It's like, I don't need a month to taper for a day if you're doing the volume and the time. Like it's like, so I think so. One of the biggest mistakes I see athletes do that I start working with that have in the past is they just take way too much time off. And I've even learned that with some athletes, especially I found, and this is I think maybe counterintuitive. a lot of the older athletes I work with do worse with the day off, a day or two beforehand. They actually need to stay and do something and to stay crisp and to stay light. Obviously, it's about fatigue. A lot of people have a travel day, which kind of forces you into having that quote unquote rest day. But if you think about it, for most people, travel is already insanely stressful. So it's not like you feel rest, but even like going out for like a 20-minute walk or something and doing something
Sure.
that keeps you crisp. And then the other thing I see with athletes in the past is that they remove almost all intensity. They're like, I shouldn't be working this hard on race week. Like, that's false, right? You have to keep intensity in there. You have to keep your legs firing. You have to keep your aerobic system ready to roll, and your anaerobic. You have to prime and keep your engine prime. It's like, like, I think I'm going to race my car and I'm just going to put it in the garage for 2 weeks. And then I'm going to come out cold and see what I can do. No, you want to keep it. You want to keep everything fresh and keep everything ready to roll. That's the other biggest thing, is stop avoiding intensity. Like the race week, like there's like the Saturday before, and even like the Monday or Tuesday before, we do a pretty significant intensity session on the bike. Like, we don't do hard intervals or anything on the track or anything, but we keep things primed. And it's just, it's a mistake that you see, is way too much rest and way too much just zone one stuff for most athletes. And their body just kind of goes into repair mode. And it's like, okay, I see that we're shutting things down. It's time to relax. It's not time to get primed.
I wonder if that becomes an effect of the accumulative training that people have gone through, to the point where, because like logically, if you're worn out or you've overtrained or whatever, you're trying to get to that let me take it easy phase a lot sooner. And so if you're like, mostly fresh and sharp, fatigued, of course, through the training period, but when you get to the last 2 weeks before a race, because I know a lot of people are like, I'm in a taper, it's over. Basically, we always talk about that. Like, the taper is sort of the target when it should be, like you're saying, there's got to be a lot of functional work in the last 2 weeks. But I think a lot of people hit taper and they're just so exhausted that, they may be overtrained or overtrained for their personal body or whatever the case may be. And then they want to just be easy for, let's get this damn thing over with.
Yeah, there's a lot to focus on a taper. And that's kind of when, as a coach, you're kind of up in your athlete's grill and like, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? How are you feeling? Because there is a fine line, right? Like, you get to your taper and you focus so long and so hard for this one big day. And you kind of do this like big exhale and you're like, and now I get to kind of relax. No, you don't. Like, it's not about relaxing. It's about slowly getting fresh. It's not about getting fresh overnight, right? You don't want to be fresh and crisp 10 days out. So, but what you want to do is, like, if you still feel run down, make it easy. Don't make it hard. If you feel like you're coming, down with something, then take a day off, right? Like, that's when, you kind of have to hedge a bet between, one day here and one day here. Is it better to take a day off here than do an easy spin? Sure, go for it. If you're really feeling it, if you think you really need it, and you're still feeling, sore or fatigued, which a lot of it's also a mental thing, right? It's like, I'm still like, I think it's also, what you don't want is just to get total lax. Like you said, like, you don't want, like, I'm in taper time. What? Like, it doesn't mean you just totally disengage, which is what you see a lot of athletes. You're like, I'm tapering. Like, if I skip today, it's no big deal. It's you see that kind of, it's a mental shift of what you should do and what you shouldn't do, And so I think it's ultimately the athlete themselves has to know best what's for the best interest. Like, we lay out a plan, we lay out a taper. Ultimately, it's up to them, right? And I tell you, it's like your body more than anybody. So if you wake up and you feel a little bit, the taper ghost pains like people have, like you haven't had a single hamstring niggle the entire year, and all of a sudden you do, you're unloading, you're getting fresh, and all of a sudden your hamstring, you're like, oh, dude, I think I gotta take a couple days off. I think I'm gonna pull my hammy. No, it's just like everybody goes through these like really weird pains like through taper time that freak people out, and just better just to kind of relax. And the biggest thing though is just to minimize, especially the last week. It's like the first thing I think I say in our email is minimize stress as much as possible, no matter what it is. Like, use this time to kind of get ahead, keep yourself busy. It doesn't mean mow your lawn. Sure. Does it mean unload 40 bags of mulch? No, it does not. Right. It's like those aren't, things you need to do to keep because most people have a hard time keeping busy. They're used to having 3.5 hour rides on Saturday. Now it's like, hour and a half, 2 hours. Like, what do I do with my day? What am I going to do? Mm-hmm. It's about limiting stress. It's not about adding stress. So if you have a crazy work schedule, you're traveling or something, it's like, then yeah, you need to kind of mitigate the impact that stress is going to have on your body, and traveling to races, especially from far away, is also a huge stressor. It's also a huge stressor. So that's the biggest thing you need to kind of really be aware of. And it's also, I think, moving into like 3 to 4 days out is really be aware of your fueling and food consumption. Taper is also, we don't talk a lot about food and body comp and dieting and this, because that's really it's neither one of our things. Like that's not our thing. But it's not a time to just be like, I'm tapering, like I can eat whatever I want, and just start filling your body full of crap that you haven't been using it for. Like you want to fill your body with the best nutrients you possibly can, right? Because it's trying to repair itself. Like if you want your body to repair and fuel itself and go, then you don't want to fill it full of crap, right? Like you don't put crap in your car if you want to run well. You put pristine. It's like, I think I'm going to go on a long road trip. So instead of gasoline, I think I'm just going to put, compost in there. And that's probably going to work for, this long road trip. Like that doesn't work that way, right? So while you can be lax and be, a little more flexible in what you eat, like really, really choose to, stick with what and don't deviate, but also don't just, be like, I think I'm going to have cheeseburger and fries every night because I'm tapering, baby. Like, I earned it. Like if you earned it, eat it after the race. Like, absolutely go to town.
Well, I mean, or at least once. It's not every day, but.
No. I'll tell you right now. You mean tell you what works?
What?
And it's not salmon the night before.
Steaks.
Every night.
Well, there's a thing.
At least you feel me on this. I know because we text about it. Is ribeyes every night, not a whole ribeye, but a half, starting on Monday.
Okay,
it's my tried and true. Most people go, it's too much fat. I'm like, no, baby, you need fat.
Well, here's the interesting thing, because I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and reading a lot about gut biomes and things like that. And there's a thing about, and I know a lot of vegans are gonna be like, oh my God, I'm shutting this thing off. But like in the long term, you need obviously a lot of fiber. And fiber is really good for you, but like during that week, that's like meat is like easily digestible for the most part, in your gut, and it doesn't, like, again, I'm no expert on this, but I do believe that if you're trying to, I think there's a challenge with that eating super healthy and getting a lot of fiber and like a lot of stuff like that before a race for a lot of people. That's why I tend to go back into this bland world,
Bland is good. Race week, baby. Bland is good. Bland's your friend. Most people
because
would say
it's an indigestion or like a digestive thing, right, that can cause. And a lot of people, I was talking to an athlete last night about digestive issues, and a lot of people have that thing during the race in their stomach. And I think you really have to, like we were just saying, it's like simplify and be bland.
Chicken and brown rice.
Yeah.
Throw a little hot sauce in there, a little soy sauce. Boom.
Alternate every calories night, and you need sodium and things like that to, kind of build up inside you and whatever. But you don't want a bunch of like crazy digestive challenges going on.
Yeah, ribeyes for me are like the easiest digestive thing in the world. Like it's my go-to. Most people would say that's unhealthy because that's too much fat, but it's so good and it's so good for you. But so just stick with what you know.
I mean, Michael Jordan. I mean,
steak and potato, baby. Steak and potato. My best marathon, steak and potato, night before. I gotta go back. I'm still sour at myself about the freaking salmon thing. It's like I had a
we
experience.
Really need to explore that.
No, we don't need that. I'm over it. I've moved past it. I'm moving on to my next race. I'm no longer.
It only makes me think like, maybe I'm going a little more high society, high society racer guy. I mean,
yeah, you're like, he's changed.
No, he's changed. Like you were kind of on the edge of flipping a switch to pescatarian or something.
Well, you know what totally flipped me, right, is that they had, it wasn't average. It wasn't, I could tell just because it was right next to the ocean, I knew it wasn't going to be fresh. You go to restaurants and you're like, it's by the ocean. You're like, it probably came in off the frozen truck just like the rest. But I was torn between, I was torn between proximity because I did feel like surely the salmon should be fine, right? It's next to the, and I'm not blaming this on my race. It just was a stupid decision when they were making them.
But there's no salmon in that part of it.
No, it's like, but they had a fillet. And that's just a weak sauce. Like, I'm not going to get a fillet the night before either because that place wouldn't have done a good fillet either, right? Because like, I'm not, no. If they had had a ribeye, game. Like, I would have done it. It would have been no question. You know, what I really need to do is, is figure out, where the next Firebirds is. Every race that I go do needs to have a Firebirds because they have an outstanding ribeye and a absolute, listen, if you've never been to Firebirds, go. They have the best baked potatoes on the entire planet. They bake them and they salt them so much that they are unbelievable. I eat the entire thing, the skin and everything. It is so fantastic. Yeah. So the next race to do, I'm going to make sure there's a Firebirds close by. Anyway,
it's a big point. Getting the restaurant.
It's a big play.
I mean, it's thinking back to that one time. Oh, there's two things I want to bring up about because my first 70.3, we ate at Olive Garden the night before the race. In Muncie.
Yep.
And I plowed down salads that day.
Huge mistake.
I know, but I had a great race.
So
I was like contradictive, but that was my first one, and I had a really good race. But I ate a ton of pasta, and who knows? I mean, I just ate.
Yeah,
like
that's what people do.
The breadsticks, and then exactly. I mean, it was just on. I didn't know anything from anything, but I remember eating a lot of salad. I don't remember a problem. So I don't know. I'm kind of an iron guy. But then my first Ironman, I was kind of upset because we went out to a Longhorns or something like that. But that's actually probably a pretty safe bet, some kind of steak chain. And I wanted to stay in the city, but we drove 15 miles out.
What race was this?
My first one.
In Wisconsin? They have a Longhorn in Wisconsin?
It was something like that. Yeah, Longhorn or...
Saturday night? Because I saw you on Friday night, right?
Yeah, Friday we got the pasta thing going, and then Saturday was the steak and potato, but we drove out to East Washington.
And as you know, it's not really about the food. Once Mike gets somewhere on site, we don't need to get back in the car again, okay? If I can walk to it, it's game. If it's a block or two away, I'm in. If we have to get in my car, we're not going.
That's why I can't do Muncie again.
Can't do it. Just can't do it. But anyway,
unless we stay in a tent.
That's right. Unless you park across the street, which I will say, they moved Muncie to October, so we won't even go into that today. But that's one of our more popular race preview podcasts. We'll move on about talking about second place. But if you're looking at Muncie and you're doing it, just be aware they have an ideal parking setup across the street. If you have a camper, the people who own their property there charge you like $5 or something. With inflation these days, it's probably
might be
15.
20.
It's probably 20. But they'll let you park there race day or the day before and just kind of eat it up. They're probably
in the yard.
They're probably pay their mortgage for the whole entire year on that race. Anyway, 70.3 food wise, stick to it. Stick with what you know. Don't do something crazy. And just get ready. The day or two before, you should be doing sessions, all swim, biking around. If you can get in the water, get in the water. I think it's becoming increasingly hard to find races where you can. I know I was talking with the athletes doing St. George 70.3. They have open water opportunities in, I think, the actual venue, which is a huge thing. Gulf Coast be the same thing. Like, they can't shut down Panama City and not let you get in the ocean. So you get to swim on the exact course, which is also huge. Galveston, you couldn't do that. Chattanooga's the same way. You can't get in the actual water the day before the race or 2 days before. You can't get on the, you can, but it could be very problematic for some racers depending on how heavy the flow of the river is. Like, if you hop in at one point, then if it's a heavy flow, then you better just start swimming upstream and then get carried back. But get in the water, ride some of the course, drive the course if you feel like you need to. If you've never been on it, there's going to be construction or a lot of turns and you think you need to figure things out. Ride the course, but the day or two beforehand, in terms of, add a little bit of intensity. Don't, not too much. You don't want to run too hard. You don't want to bike too hard, but you need to keep the legs lively. I always recommend riding your bike the day of check-in, just to make sure that things are working. And I would say this from personal experience, because in Galveston, not the day of, but the Friday morning, I got up and rode 30 minutes, took my bike out of the truck, hopped on it, spun about 2 times, and thought went up. My Di2 battery is dead. Nothing. So if I hadn't have ridden, I would have just, would have clicked through the gears when I checked it in, but that one I kind of, wouldn't have panicked, but I've been like, that's kind of a stressor. Like, I need to, luckily, I had my charger in the middle console and plugged it in the USB and charged it for 5 minutes. It's ready to roll. But like you always work through all your gears.
How many times I've heard that happening in
always
a race?
checking, always overcharge it the night before. But that's why it's always like if you're going to travel and drive to a race, if you use Di2, keep it in your middle console because most cars now come with like a USB port. Plug in the USB. I would have had it in the back seat and just plugged it in on my drive down there. I was like fully charged when I got there. It was like super easy and convenient. So do that. Check your bike in. Make sure you work through all the gears, and really just start to visualize like your last run, your last swim, your last ride. Visualize how it's going to feel on race day. Use all the gear you're going to use on race day. Make sure that everything's fitting right and feeling right, and you're kind of getting in that zone that everything is race ready. The biggest thing with the swim is, because most, at least Ironman 70.3 courses have the buoys out a day or 2 days beforehand. The swim out, whatever. If you want to swim it, that's fine. The most important thing you need to do is swim the end. Like you need to turn around, find your markers. Especially like a Gulf Coast 70.3 comes to mind. I've done that race 6 times. It's pretty easy to sight on the way out because you follow the buoys, right? And there is no landmark, right? Unless there happens to be like the perfectly placed barge that's out like, 8 miles offshore, you can sight off that, but it's a straight shot. It's the way back in that if it's wavy and if there's a lot of current or a lot of rollers, then it's going to be hard to see the buoys. So it's always nice to sight the way in, like the last 400 to 600 meters on the way in. You can pick and figure out where the finishing chute's going to be. But if you can't see that, then you look above it because it's so much easier to sight off of a building or a hotel or something like that. Those are the easiest things to sight off of, not trying to look for a buoy that you may or may not see depending on how wavy the currents are. Plus, depending on what races is, you might be looking for a red buoy and you might see 19 orange and 15 red kayaks that are just going to make it even that much harder to kind of see things. I'm still on it, baby.
He's just slid it in there.
I'm just going to slid it in there. It's like How
about when the swim caps
Ohio
are the same?
70.3 can't handle it if you're listening.
Caps.
You're one of my favorites, but please, dear God, give us pizza and Snickers.
Have you ever been in one of those when the orange swim caps, when the caps are the same colors?
You're like, what are we doing here? Like, what are we doing with our life right now? Like,
what are we doing
with our life? This is me getting old. Then I'll just talk about race day. Like 70.3, if you can't get in the water beforehand and warm up, I think you should do something. I think you need to do something to get your heart rate up because, like I said, if you're depending on if you're racing it or not racing it, get your heart rate up. Like, you see the majority of, quote unquote cardiac events happen in the swim. Right? And I think a large part of it is due from anxiety and wetsuit restriction. And also you're going from, 50 beats per minute resting heart rate up to, 150 in like 2 seconds, and plus shorter breath and panicking. Like it's a recipe for disaster. So get warm and get a good lather going. Run a little bit, if you need to. Get your heart rate going, like, and run a little bit, run some stride, just kind of get a good sweat going. Please, for the love of all things holy, don't put your wetsuit on when you leave the hotel room. Like, that is a huge pet peeve of mine. It's not because, it's a fashion thing, but put your wetsuit on. Do this. If you think I'm full of it, check your heart rate, okay? See where it's at. Just stand there for 2 minutes, and then go put your wetsuit on. It's going to be about 10 beats higher, at least, just from putting it on. It's also going to make it harder to breathe. And if you already have a panicky feeling of being in a wetsuit, then why sit in a straitjacket for 45 minutes before your race starts, especially if it's going to be a warm morning, it's going to be humid? Why sit in a bodysuit of neoprene that's just going to suck the sweat and raise your heart rate before you even get in the water?
I can attest to this because I have a confession to make with my shoulder. I put my wetsuit on the other night just to sit in it because I thought it would help neoprene on my shoulder.
What are we doing here? What are we doing?
But here? I mean, I sat there and it made me really uncomfortable.
There on your couch?
In my desk chair watching a little TV.
Oh my God.
Maybe I'll post a photo of that.
Did you take a photo?
I think I did.
Oh my God.
I mean, because but I used to be the guy that would post that photo, but now I'm like, maybe I'll just save it for the archives.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea. Like, we maybe.
But really, yeah, no, it's fun. I just laughed because when you said that, don't put it on the hotel. It dropped. It took me back to I think like Chattanooga or something when I get on the hotel elevator at the Holiday Inn. It opens
people
up.
People in there in it already.
And it's like 2 hours before the race.
Like, listen, if it's that hard to put on.
Sometimes it's cold.
Stop it. Then bring a sweatshirt. Like, if
sweatshirts work too.
Sweatshirts, like, bring a hoodie. There's nothing better than a race morning with a hoodie on. That's just like a fact. Who cares if it's cold? Okay? If it's that hard to get on, practice more or get a different size or get a better wetsuit. You should not, under any circumstances, put it on in the hotel room. Okay? It's just way too long to be in. It's going to like totally tighten. And then I guarantee you're probably going to get a calf cramp in the water if you have it on for too long. Approach the swim. I tell our athletes fairly simple. Swim your potential, bike smart, run like hell. That is pretty much the standard, phrase for 70.3 racing. Your swim going into it, you shouldn't go out and swim lazy. Obviously, again, if you're looking to go fast that day and you want to push it, you don't need to swim lazy. You need to, you swim with a purpose, but not an anaerobic purpose. Like, you need to be long and strong and purposeful. I would say, like, we always use the term like swimming on a rivet, right? It's like, it's that feeling where you're controlled and strong, but it doesn't feel hard, right? Like, I would consider it like a high zone 2, purposeful swim. Like, that's how you should feel in the water. You shouldn't feel lazy. You shouldn't feel soft. You shouldn't feel relaxed.
I like that, man. That's that both sides working together thing that I think gets underestimated in swimming.
What both sides?
That rivet.
Yeah. It's
what I mean? It's like, I think people get in their brain when they struggle with swimming, sometimes they're always like, okay, now I'm on my right side, so I got to do this. But when you're, you know what I mean?
Oh, I do.
Like, when you're on your right side, your left side is doing something opposite and, just as effective. And you have to, like, that balance should just keep going instead of like, okay, I'm done with my right, now I got to start my left. It's like togetherness of love.
It's togetherness. Look at you. Togetherness of love. From the guy who sat in his office chair with a wetsuit on. It is the way, I guess another way to put it is like, you should swim, the swim leg, you should be on the offensive, right? And I think way too many triathletes go into the water with this defensive mentality. I don't need to run into people. I just need to kind of stay out of the way. I need to keep it really safe and really slow and really careful. And I just got to get out of the water. And I don't want to, if the current's coming, I just got to keep going. I can't raise my heart rate. I got to keep things really slow. Like, that's going to become problematic. Okay. Very problematic. If you're, like we saw this last weekend, like if you were swimming softly and carefully and you went into that water in Galveston with I'm going to be on the defensive mentality instead of the offensive. Like, I'm going to do my swim, right? I might adjust a little bit with my stroke rate. If you have a different stroke, which again is a huge problem for most triathletes, they're 1-speed Steves and 1-speed Sallies. Like, they get in the water and this is how I swim. This is how controlled I am. 1 stroke, 2 stroke, 3 strokes, breathe. 1 stroke, 2 stroke, 3 strokes, breathe. Meanwhile, you've only covered 1.5 yards. Okay, like, it's way too calm and way too relaxed. That's why, again, you practice that in your swim training or open water, however you prepare. But you need to do it with purpose. You can't just let the conditions and the environment be in charge of what's going on, because that is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for a very, very long swim. Do you want to run into people? Not necessarily, but if you do, then who cares? Like, you're probably going to get touched, right? Like, even with the amount of, like, distance they're putting with like the 3 people in the water at a time, like, you're going to run into people. Like, I was swapping paint with some people, on like, even after like after like 800 meters, but you thought things would be stretched out. And somebody came up on my right and was like moving into my, my line. And of course, I gave me a little bit of the business. I was like, no, you stay over there. I got my line. You're not going to bump me off my line.
Yeah.
You got to kind of, that's when you do overextend. You kind of do if I'm breathing there right and your left arm's out in front of you, you have somebody on your left that's going to come out, and you kind of do the little outward, little nudge, little push, no, I'm going to keep my line. You kind of stay here. That's why swimming in a square and swimming in a box is a good thing, is you own that space. Own it, swim controlled, swim on a rivet, don't take it too relaxed, but also don't go, threshold and be out of it, which, again, you see a lot of athletes doing. Like we mentioned this before, you and I have witnessed a ton of swim exits. And people come out of there, and I think, how in the world are you going to make it for the next, 69 miles? Like, because they look absolutely shredded coming out of the water. I think that's also more of a product of preparation or maybe anxiety. And then you get out of the water, wetsuit off, goggle cap off, run to your transition rack, That's another thing. That's another thing difference you'll see with people who are trying to like race it versus people who are just trying to get through is you see people who run to don't sprint, but run, and then you have people who just get out of the water and walk, to their rack. Nothing wrong with either, but if you're racing it, then most people are going to run to it, and your legs are going to feel like absolute trash. No matter if you walk or run, they're going to feel like trash. You're going to think, how am I going to bike 56 miles and run 13 when my legs are already hurting in transition? It's all the blood coming back down. It's just give it a minute, give it the first 5 miles to bike. You find your stuff, you get your gear. Don't piddle, right? But don't rush. Just get everything. I think Erickson and one of our athletes said, slow is fast, but not too slow. Okay. Smooth is fast is probably a better way to put it. I think that's what he said. Get everything you need to, double check. Don't leave without. If you do, go back and get it. Again, if you're coming out of transition, for the love of all things holy, and I did this in Galveston got to practice what I preach, is cross the line and then run up like 10 steps, right? And don't be the wee wobbler and the bobblehead on the bike trying to wee wobble your way, trying to clip in the same time. Get off, and then if you got a 56-mile ride, no matter what you're trying to do for it, whether it's a sub 220 bike split or a 3.5 hour or 4 hour bike split, the first 30 to 40 miles need to be in control. Like, you don't need to feel like you're pressing it. If you, no matter what, even if you're on the higher end of the spectrum, it's usually because your fitness is there. Don't go for broke, or lift the effort or lift the pace until at least mile 40. You want it to make you, every ride you do, no matter the distance, you want to keep it as even as you possibly can. You want to keep it, your intensity factor as around 1 point, or your VI, your variability index, as close as you can to 1.0 the entire time. You want to stay even, because usually after 40 miles, you'll know what you got for the day. But if you make that decision at mile 15, it's probably going to be a little bit too early. And then you bumped up and you decided to go with a higher heart rate or a higher RPE or a higher watt. And then by mile 45, you're thinking that was a bad idea, because you're slowing down, not speeding up. The last 16 miles from mile 40 to 56, you should feel like either you're speeding up, and getting faster, or you're at least passing people and passing the people that maybe passed you before him, because you've been able to lift the effort. If you're looking at RPE, I would say you should be on like a 6 or a 7, and then the last 12, 16 miles, 10 miles should be at a 7 or 8, pretty steady, zone 3 effort. But always ask yourself, while I feel good, and while I feel like I could really probably lift the effort for the last 16 miles, is it worth it? And is it going to negatively affect my run? And that is the biggest question you have to ask the last 16 miles of the bike.
Yeah, I've done both. I know exactly what you're talking about. I remember at Muncie 70.3, when I had it might have been my fastest bike. I can't remember, but I remember I was holding on for dear life. I was pushing to try to get to a place. And I think what happens, at least from my perspective, is, you get that in. And then actually I feel usually pretty good when I get onto the run. And then, but it's the thing where, it's like that thing you can't, everybody thinks just because you bike hard, you're not going to feel good when immediately on the run. Right. But it's just that thing that catches up with you later that nobody can see. Like, we always forget about. It's like we always talk about it, but the last 5 miles on the run or whatever is where it is. And every decision you make, how's that going to affect that part of the race? So I know I've been there, like the last time I did Chattanooga, I had a different mentality. I was like, all right, I'm in a good spot here, and I feel strong about this ending. And it proved out on the run. So I think, I guess what to say is, like, a lot of people, I think, including me, over the years have had this time goal, and, we get into that mile per hour mentality and do whatever it takes. I want to hold this because that's going to be my benchmark for when I need to get off the bike, is at this time or whatever. And that can drag you into a dangerous place that, you can't get back on the run. So I think it's important to listen to what you're saying, because, like, you have to, and it's like, I think we talk about is, you have to control the race, not let it control you, the course. So, just that, and that little bit of pullback isn't going to make that much difference, but it could make a huge difference going the other way on the run.
Yeah, it's all about when and where and how much time, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's you think about, but if I lift my speed and it takes quite a bit of effort, and power to lift your speed a significant amount to raise it a significant amount enough to where you're going to put in 2 minutes or 3 minutes on the last 10, 16, it's like covering a whole mile on the bike, right? But that 3 minutes you might gain on the run, if you go back, it's like 15 seconds, 20 seconds per mile, on the run that you could give up or you can get back.
Mm-hmm.
Always think about the run. And then, coming in T2, make sure you practice your, clipping or unclipping or whatever you choose to do, because that is also the most theatrical and dramatic place to stand. If you're spectating a race, is watching people fly into T2, doing their flying dismounts or not braking fast enough or whatever it is, but just take your time. You're not going to lose it right there. You're not going to win it right there. You might definitely lose it. And then again, same thing, usually your T2 should be your quickest. Helmet off, shoes off. Put your shoes on, and then if you have a visor or some glasses or some gel or a bib to go on your waist, don't put them on at your transition spot, okay? As soon as you have your shoes on and you can begin running, then take your hands, pick up what you need, and go. Put your visor on as you run. Put your pockets with stuff while you run. Put your race belt on while you run. Don't just stand there in limbo, frozen, putting everything on. Do it while you're moving. As long as you have your bib number on as you leave T2, you're fine. Don't take there and do it forever. Also, a little friendly tip for the first timers: start with your race number on your butt so you can see where you're trying to clip. I see so many people trying to clip the race up behind them, like, I can't feel it, I can't touch it. Just move it around to the front. Okay, you can see it, you can stare at it. It's a lot easier to get that way. And then just slide it back around to your race numbers in front, wherever you want to race, as long as it's visible. And then once you're on the run, it's game day. That's when everything else matters. You see people lose races, you see people win races, you see people gain spots, you see people lose spots. It is where, in my opinion, your race is made or lost is on the run. We never give paces just because I think it's pointless, because you never know how you're going to feel coming in a transition. If you feel tired, if you feel lazy, if you feel out of it, I always say go to Coke straight out of the gate, because you're probably just you're mentally tired. You should need some sugar and some caffeine to pep you right up. But I always tell athletes, come out of the gate, go with a scale of 1 to 10, like a 6 or a 7, pretty hot. And then after 5 or 6 miles, lift the pace and then just kind of hold on tight. Like you don't necessarily need to look for a negative split, because I think that'll be, that'll be difficult given the day. But an even split is remarkable on a 70.3. If you're racing it, is to have anywhere close. Like if your back half and your front half are only off by 40 seconds to a minute, well done. Like, really, really, really well done. But what you see is people go from, 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 minutes on the back half that they lost, and that usually comes back to, the bike. They just they use their energy there. They might have gained 2.5 minutes, but then they're losing 7, so it's a net loss. So, and go by feel, because you just never know. You never know how you're going to feel. You never know when your legs are going to come up. Like most people don't really feel good on the run until like miles 3 or 4. Like you kind of have to like get rid of usually for me, it's like 4 miles. Like the first 2 miles, I'm getting rid of my bike legs. The next 2 miles, I'm finding my run legs. And then once I've got them, I'm like, oh, there they are. I can do this for 9 miles. And you go. Mm-hmm. Don't try to find them and find your goal pace coming out of transition. You don't know what the heat's going to be like. You don't know how your body's going to react. It's a huge, gigantic mistake that everyone can make. But like, go by your feel. The biggest thing is don't come out of the gate too hot. Don't come out of there going too fast, because then it's ball game. Because you come out of the gate too fast, and your first 3 miles are tremendous, and then all you do is see the pace slow down and slow down and slow down. That's just a mental thing. Really, if you can get to mile 10 and you're just not getting like a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, then you're destined for, I think, a great run, because you can do anything for a 5K. You can hold on strong. You can do well. It's all about effort. It's about pacing, whether you wear a watch or not wear a watch. But the thing about 70.3 is you don't want to come out of the gate too slow, right? Because you're going to give up time. Like if you want to go for it, go for it. It's not, especially based on how you train, it's not that long of a run, especially if you put in the time and you have the speed. Like it's not that long to be able to go for it. But be smart with it. And again, like, your run is usually going to be destined by how well you fueled on the bike and how well you paced.
Mm-hmm. And we've said it a million times, but don't come out too hot on the run. And I think that can also be a literal thing. So I just, I did something at the last 70.3 that I really think was a good, thing for me in the long run. I have that shoulder bag cooler thing that I bring into transition. I put my gear in the cooler, and I also loaded 2 huge Ziploc bags full of ice in the morning. And it didn't hold, and you could probably do this in a backpack, but just have it be ice. And then by the time you get there after the bike, it's melted and it's freezing cold. And I just grabbed those things and loaded them in my kit. And slowly, as I started the race, dripped ice cold water on myself just to cool myself down. And because it was a hot day, or we knew it was going to be hot. That's the reason I even thought of that or whatever. But it was so nice to have this a lot of ice cold water to be able to dump on myself right at the beginning. Because I think it's that old thing. You get off the bike and it's cold, or not cold, but it's windy, and you feel I feel great, but you're super hot most likely when you get off that bike, and you'll start to feel it within the first half mile of that run. Yep. And if you can get that baseline temperature down a little bit, I think that really sets you up in a good way, and it allows you to go out a little bit. Like you said, you want to not go out too hot, but on a 70.3, if you're going to go for it and you're racing for the podium or something, or your best race, you don't want to give up too much. I mean, I could see almost walking part of the first mile in a full because you got so much time, but in a 70.3, you can't screw around too much with that.
It's a game of chess from the moment you get in the water. It's a piece here, a piece there, a move here, a move there. But it's all about putting yourself in the best position to finish the way you want to finish. Again, you want to start the race on the offensive in the water. You want to end it on the offensive. You don't want to be purging minutes and bleeding time and having to triage yourself from bonking or not taking enough, going too fast, and you're on the defensive just to kind of hold on and not lose any more time. It needs to be about gaining time, and that's.
I like that offensive thing because, it's not defensive, but you want to take most of the race in this balanced stance, balanced, ready to go forward if you need to, but not leaning back. And then, like you're saying, there's moments when you need to be offensive more than anything. And I mean, I'm sure you're going to pull back a little bit here and there, but for the most part, just be in that balanced zone and able to go in an offensive manner, no matter what.
Being offensive and being calculated. Yeah, it's you just never want to be, hopefully, never want to have to be on the defense because you're making enough. You're always ahead. You're always looking ahead. You're always making the next right move, moving the next right piece in the puzzle to lead up to your best day.
Yep.
We hope this podcast wasn't offensive.
I don't know how it could be.
I don't know, who knows these days?
Hey, we got plenty of gear for sale on the website. Let's get on there and check it out.
And soon we'll have some C26 water bottles.
Oh yeah. And if you order $50 worth of gear, maybe we'll send you a water bottle.
Maybe we will. If you want to order, we'll put some out. We'll post something here in the next day or two, and get that out. But as always, we love you. We appreciate you. Thanks for giving us your time. Hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you have more questions or just interest in everything that we do, you can hop on over to our website, c26triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. We also have our ongoing club membership, which is on the rise again. We also have 5 different coaches for you to choose from if Mike and I aren't your flavor. And let's be honest, sometimes we're not. We have plenty of options for awesome people in there. Check that out on the coaches tab. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, reach out to Mike. He is at crushingiron@gmail.com. If you have the same for me, I'm at c26coach@gmail.com.
Well, I think that's it, buddy.
All right, man. I'll see you tomorrow.
All right. See ya.